Hey guys, welcome back to Primer Podcast. We are here with Drew Cheap, and I think
Hello.
this is our first time doing the podcast
Yeah, it
together.
is. Yeah,
Yeah,
we got a new mix today.
I know. It's great. So I'm glad to be able to do it with you.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So we're in our second week of Storytellers with Heather Thompson Day is the speaker for this Sunday, but she also was a keynote speaker for our women's conference.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
yeah, so we had um, about 250 ladies
Wow.
here in the student center and all over the campus. And we had Heather Thompson Day and Renee Rochester and Molly Stillman. And
Amazing.
then Jamie Smith was our worship leader. So it's just really a
Yeah.
great time
Yeah.
just to worship God and be together and fellowship with other ladies.
Super cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad you guys let us in on Sunday morning.
Yes, we all just almost was thinking, we like this lady thing.
Yeah.
It's pretty nice to
Yeah. Thanks for the
all the
invite.
yeah. So Heather, the her message, it was so great to just to realize the way that she brought in the realization of how God uses people
Mhm.
and throughout the whole Bible.
Yeah.
And you and I were just talking about how it really makes, I know for personal, it makes me relate to those that sometimes I tend to put in the higher standard
Yeah.
in the Bible, and obviously they are, but it makes me realize, not to discount what I feel like God's asking me to do because
Yeah.
He did truly use just ordinary people that society would really have just kind of cast aside
Yeah.
as not valuable or
Right.
not enough in their terms.
Well, and one of those great points was the fact that physical deficiency didn't mean a spiritual deficiency.
Right.
And really, to me, when I was listening and thinking through that, I really thought about how we all have physical deficiencies and we all have these deficiencies. And really that's what God's power is for, right?
Mhm.
And until I'm able to kind of recognize some of those areas for, and like you said, I appreciate reading through the Bible and being able to see myself in these different folks. Um, but that's when I can see Jesus' power the most in my life, is when I have recognized a major deficit there and seen this is something that I couldn't have done myself and I had to depend on
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah.
You know, so especially a lot of the characters, it may have not been impressive if God used great leaders and political leaders, because they already
Right.
had the power and the respect.
Yeah. Yeah, there was one part in Luke that she specifically said that was Luke 1:5 that it says, in the time of Herod king of Judea, there was a priest named Zachariah who belonged to the priestly division of Abdiah. I don't even know how to say that, but that's how I'm going to say it. His wife, Elizabeth, was also a descendant of Aaron. Both of them were righteous in the sight of God, observing all the Lord's commands and decrees blamelessly. But they were childless because Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. And well, I'll ask you, what what was something that stood out to you about that passage? Um, Maybe this time reading it that maybe never stood out to you before.
Yeah, I think both in listening to Heather and reading more, and now that I'm older and I'm a father, I'm seeing more about the significance of the family unit, especially in that time, about
Mhm.
how significant it was to have family and to have children, and that kind of being equated to being favorable in God's eyes, and what it sort of looked like or felt like if you weren't able to have children.
Yeah.
For me in my 20s when I read it, I was like, great, I don't want kids anyways.
Right. Yeah.
But seeing the great weight that had on folks, especially in the old age where you've likely probably already given up on that being a hope anymore.
Yeah, because it says they were very old.
Yeah.
And so that is something that they probably had, and truthfully, like later on in the passage when the angel came and told Zachariah that they would conceive,
Mhm.
um, he basically said, laughed at him and
Yeah,
said,
like,
"There's no way."
yeah. You know how old we are?
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think that is such a realization of mine as well. But I think one of the coolest realizations that I had this time was um, that Luke specifically mentioned people of power,
Mhm.
and for really no reason other than to realize for us to see that God had favor on Zachariah and
Mhm.
Elizabeth, and in a time where there were these others that were in high power,
Yeah.
where society would have looked to them for a understanding of what was righteous and powerful.
Right.
And so that was interesting that he specifically started that passage that way, that the in the time of these rulers.
Yeah. All of these other leaders that people likely saw as the examples or the powerful ones and all that.
Yeah,
And God said, "No, I'm the powerful one, and let me choose who I want to."
yeah,
And the fact that He gave them a child despite Zechariah's stubbornness or
right.
questioning or whatever you call that.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and we were talking earlier that how many of our you know really the people that we look to in the Bible, David and Moses and um, all the disciples, how we see them now looking through a different lens, that these are ordinary people, and so we're able to see that God used them, so why would he not use us, even though maybe there is a physical deficiency, um or what we feel like is a spiritual deficiency, like
yeah,
um we're not where we need to be
yeah,
spiritually.
right.
Is kind of our thought is like, if we're, I know one of the um, questions that was on our survey a few weeks ago was, um, if you feel like you don't spend enough time reading the Bible or whatever it
Right.
was, and so many of us said, we don't do that, and yet um, that is something that we can struggle with, but yet God can still
Yeah.
continue to use us and push us.
Doesn't that take some like pressure off of you a little
Right.
bit?
Yeah.
That's how I feel. It's like, oh man, I don't have to do all this. And
Right.
and Pete mentioned it a few weeks back of like kind of letting go and reaching down into the undercurrent. And I'm
Hmm.
getting that kind of theme of like I can just let go. This isn't I don't have to be the world's greatest speaker or leader or
Right.
whatever. And in fact, that's not my job. It's not what God calls me to be.
Right. Yeah, exactly. What This is off the cuff. I haven't,
Uh-oh.
what are like, how have you felt like God has pushed you in times where maybe you didn't feel equipped, but yet He equipped you to do something that you weren't, you had to rely on Him.
Yeah. I'm glad you asked off the cuff. But for me, it's almost in a past tense. God had to sort of remind me that I wasn't equipped.
Hmm.
I grew up in a wonderful house, and my parents, a lot of you guys have met, now go to
Hmm.
this church, and went to a wonderful school and found a fairly easy life. And I think God sort of had to show me some places where, hey, you are broken and we are broken. And despite what the world may see, whether you're good in class or in athletics or whatever it is, you are still a broken person who's an ordinary person that needs me. And so looking back, I've seen a lot of places where God sort of had to humble me first.
Hmm.
And then I have seen like, okay, really I am missing some big chunks. And I've had to see where he's filled those in. And I've mentioned before on here with Jarm spending time in Mexico and really being in awe of the size of the brokenness for a lot of kids there and how big the faith is that
Yeah.
comes in that gap. It's almost as if like there's more space for God to show his power.
Mm.
And so it's led me to sort of start reflecting on where are my shortcomings, and rather than be disappointed or embarrassed, use those as places that God can be even bigger.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I
Yeah.
think that's similar to mine. Is like I feel like I wanted to hide my
Mm.
shortcomings from society because it made me feel like yeah I didn't want anybody to realize I was not perfect.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And so basically God, pushed me through that and has made it the realization of is only through him that we
Mhm.
have this ability to
Yeah.
to do things that are unimaginable for us being an ordinary
Right.
a person. And so only through his power
Right.
can we do the things that he's asked us to do.
Do you relate most to anybody in the Bible with that story?
I think different times I have related to different people.
Mhm.
I think sometimes with my stubbornness and um, feeling like I can need to control everything, I
Yeah.
would relate probably to Peter.
Right?
And then, but most like recently, because of just different things, I feel like God's been putting on my heart is the Moses
Mhm.
is the feeling like I think I mentioned this a few podcasts back is that um, you know Moses was like, God, why would you ask me to do this?
Yeah.
I stumble over my words. I make up words. Aaron is such a better speaker. Why would you not ask him?
Right.
And what, like I think every single time I think of myself in that way, and I'm having that same conversation with myself, God reminds me like, Jessica, it is not in your power.
Yeah.
It is in my power that this will happen. And so don't rely on yourself.
Yeah.
It is in how often has he used ordinary people
Yeah.
throughout the Bible, but then in our times, like we've seen so many people that have made a difference in our lives,
Right.
and they're just another whether it's a teacher or
Mhm.
a pastor or a
Right.
counselor, whatever it is that they've made a difference in our journey in encouraging us to grow closer to God,
Yeah.
and they're not what our society would think of as being powerful and
Yeah.
someone as a in a ruling type of way.
It really does. I just keep coming back to it. Just makes me hopeful that I don't have to be perfect, and that I don't even have to put my hope into a human leader, because
Right.
we're all short of it. And I put my hope in a God that has shown, time and again, that he's got all the power for anything that we're lacking.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, thank you for coming and
of
talking with
course.
us. And
Yeah,
it's been fun to finally do a
that's right.
podcast
We
together.
finally got the right combo.
Yeah, that's right. So, guys, we hope that you just enjoy your time together in your small group and your individual study, and we'll see you next week.
Thanks.